But tonight was different. His horse, a pale Mustang named Vesper, refused to move another inch. Her ears stood rigid, pointing toward the mouth of the canyon like two daggers of fear. Hervé whispered soft French lullabies to her, but even his voice trembled. The moon was high, washing the canyon in white and shadows. That's when he heard it, the cry. It wasn't animal. It was both, a woman's scream tangled with a howl of a starving wolf. It echoed through the canyon walls, warping as it bounced from rock to rock. Hervé froze. He had heard stories whispered by Navajo elders, campfire warnings spoken in low voices. Do not answer. Do not look. Do not believe your ears. But every instinct in his body betrayed him. Before he even realized what he was doing, he cupped his hands and yelled back, "Who's there?" The canyon replied, not with words but with laughter. Not joyful laughter. Mocking. Hungry. Vesper reared, nearly throwing him off. Hervé grabbed the reins and steadied her, cursing himself for speaking. That was the rule. They get stronger when you acknowledge them. He tried to turn her around, but the air behind him shifted. The cold moved in before the wind. The horses steamed in the moonlight like fog. Hervé on the ridge above. For a moment he saw nothing. Then, movement. A figure stood atop the rocks. Long limbs. Head cocked unnaturally to the side, like it hadn't yet figured out how to hold itself upright. His first thought was woman. His second was no. The thing looked human only in outline. Its arms dangled too long, nearly reaching its knees. Its skin, if that was skin, hung loose like clothing draped over bones 2 sizes too small. Hervé knew enough not to call out again. He switched to instinct. He didn't reach for his rifle. He didn't just waited. Silent. So. Watching. The thing leaned forward, mirroring him. Then, it opened its mouth. Another scream. But instead it spoke. In a perfect imitating voice. Vesper screamed like a woman and bolted down the canyon. Hervé clung to tore through the darkness, branches whipping his face, hooves striking sparks against stone. The wind roared past him, but even through the chaos, he heard it again. Behind him. Closer now. Running on 2 legs. And laughing. And for the first time in his life, Hervé Duval knew what it truly meant to be hunted. Vesper didn't stop running until her legs gave out beneath. She collapsed beside a dry river bed, trembling so violently that Hervé could feel her heart. He dismounted slowly, every bone in his body rattling. Sweat soaked his backfold. He placed a hand over her flank, whispering soft apologies in French. The night, the moon stolen behind clouds as if even the sky didn't want to waste him. Hervé forced himself in through the nose, out through the mouth. He had to think, remember the rules. The Navajo spoke of them in quiet circles, only when the fire was low and the doors were barred. Don't wander, don't follow voices, and above all, never speak to one name. He had broken that rule before he even realized he was being tested. For a long moment there was silence. No laugh, no shifting shape, only the whisper of distant wind and Vesper's ragged breathing. He reached for his rifle and cocked the hammer, silently. He didn't aim it forward. He aimed it behind him, because that's where it would come from. That's how they worked. He had heard enough stories from traders, bounty hunters, who refused to camp near sacred ground. They can use your voice. They can wear your skin, what you trust, and feed on it. Hervé's throat tightened as a thought slithered into his mind. What if it had learned more than just his voice? He scanned the darkness with sharp eyes honed from years. Hervé Duval was not a man born of softness. He had left France at 16, for him after striking a nobleman who tried to take his sister. The sea had made him a survivor. The mountains of Canada had made him a fighter. The deserts of New Mexico had made him a ghost, moving job to job, no one, needed by everyone. To the military, he was a scout. To the settlers, he was a foreigner. To the natives, he was an intruder. Posters, he was already dead. And yet, tonight was the he felt unwelcome on the earth itself. And just as the sweat on his neck cooled into ice, he heard it. Drip. He didn't move. Drip. Not water. Not blood. Something thicker. Something intentional. Slowly he turned his head. There, hanging from the branch of a mesquite tree, was a scrap of fabric. No, not fabric. Clothing. His clothing. Torn from the sleeve of the coat he had discarded 2 days ago near an abandoned cabin. It fluttered softly like a flag of surrender. Hervé's heart turned to stone. He hadn't told anyone he hadn't been followed. He hadn't left tracks. Something had been watching him long before tonight. He backed away slowly, rifle steady, breath held. Vesper nudged his side, urging him to move faster, but Hervé ran blindly again. He needed higher ground. A vantage point. Somewhere he could see before being seen. He began walking toward the rocky ledges above, boots sinking softly into the... Each step felt heavier than the last, like the earth itself was warning him to turn back. But Hervé Duval had never turned back from anything. Not from storms. Not from gunmen. Not from death itself. Yet as he climbed that ridge, every hair on his arms rose like needles. Not from cold. Not from fear. From realization. Whatever hunted him was not just imitating his voice. Was learning him. Piece by piece. And by dawn. It might wear him. Hervé climbed the ridge with the precision of a predator, not prey. Each foothold was tested twice. Every loose stone brushed aside to avoid noise. The desert below stretched out like an endless ocean of rust and silver. And for a moment he thought he saw movement far off in the moonlight, too distant to identify, yet too deliberate to dismiss. He whispered a prayer he hadn't used since he was a boy in line, not asking for safety but for clarity, death. He feared not knowing what killed him. Near the tucked between 2 jutting walls of sandstone, he found it, a shallow cave just deep enough to conceal him and his horse. Vesper entrance, nostrils flaring. Hervé pressed a hand against her cheek. Jesus. I know, he murmured. But better a roof of stone, sky full of ice. She relented, stepping inside with a reluctant snort. Hervé followed, crouching low. The cave was narrow but dry, scattered with pebbles and dry weeds. For a moment he believed they were alone. Then he saw it. A fire pit. Cold but recent. Ashes still clumped instead of scattered. Beside it, bones. Small ones. Child-sized. Picked clean. Arranged in a circle like a warning. Or ritual. Hervé knelt slowly beside them, his jaw clenched. Coyotes didn't stack bones. Bears didn't make rings. And no human he knew would sleep beside the remains of children. On the far wall of the cave had carved symbols, sharp, angry strokes gouged into the stone. Navajo hissed. But no, these prayers. They were scratches. Claw marks. As though something trapped inside had tried to claw its way out. He rose and pressed his back against the wall, rifle aimed at the mouth of the cave. His breathing slowed. His senses sharpened. He became a statue, silent, immovable. For nearly an hour nothing moved. The night outside grew still. Even the insects seemed to hold their breath. Hervé almost dared to believe he'd found a moment of safety. He heard it. A whisper. Not outside. Inside. Right behind him. It was so soft he thought at first it was his imagination. But then it came again, closer to his ear, breathy, strained, as if spoken through lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. Don't speak. Hervé spun, rifle raised, and froze. Nothing. No figure. No shadow. No eyes glinting in the... But the voice hadn't come from air. It had come from stone. The scratches in the wall, they were words, carved with desperation. He ran his fingers along them, feeling each jagged groove. Not Navajo. Not Apache. French. His language. 3 words. ILT regard. Watches you. The cave smaller. Colder. Alive. And before Hervé could react, Vesper let out a scream. But of warning. Because something was standing at the cave entrance. Blocking the moonlight. Waiting. And it was wearing his face. For a heartbeat, Hervé didn't move. Couldn't. It stood in the moonlight like a mirror cut from nightmare. Broad shoulders, tangled hair, the familiar scar across the jaw he'd earned in a bar cafe. But its smile was wrong. Too wide. Too still. As if the expression but never understood what it meant. Vesper stomped her hooves and bared her teeth, ears flat against her skull. Hervé's rifle trembled in his hands, not from fear, but from rage. This thing had stolen his voice. Now it wore his skin. If it could mimic him this completely, then how long had it been watching? How many of his habits did it? How much more would it take? The creature tilted its head, gesture with unnerving precision. It laughed. Not in his voice. In his father's. Hervé hadn't heard since the man years ago in foreign soil. His knees nearly buckled. Had been stern but kind, a man of few words but deep strength. Hearing that voice here, twisted and empty, was worse than any threat. He himself and forced his breath to... Anger was a weapon. Panic was death. You picked the wrong man to follow, he whispered. Thing stopped laughing. It smiled, as if unsure what expression should replace it. Then, in perfect French, no. We. Not I. Hervé fired. The blast lit the carry. The creature's head jerked back. Half its skull shattering in a spray of shadow and flesh. Or something like flesh. It staggered but didn't fall. Hervé cocked the rifle again, fire once more. But the creature turned to look at him with its remaining eye, angry. Not afraid. Disappointed. It raised a hand to its ruined face, pressed its palm to the wound, and pulled. The flesh peeled away like wet parchment, revealing not bone but a shifting blur of fur, sinew, and light beneath.